Welcome to Iron Butterfly Podcast. My name is Megan Jaffer.
And I'm Katie Hopkins, and we'll be your hosts.
We created Iron Butterfly Podcast in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. Our podcast continues her legacy, inviting the unsung heroines of the United States intelligence community to share their stories with aspiring leaders like you.
Welcome back. I'm Dina from Blue Halo, here to kick off part 2 of Iron Butterfly's podcast's season 8 premiere with Katrina Mulligan. So I actually started my professional life as an Army officer. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the engineers from West Point and had the privilege of being stationed in Europe as a 22-year-old. Which was really cool until September 11th. And then it got obviously a lot busier. And I found myself deployed to Kosovo for 6 months and then did my 6-month deployment to Kuwait and Iraq. And from there, I came back and did a stint in industry and then ended up at the CIA at the Directorate of Operations, where I was at for almost 15 years. And got to do a lot of cool things with a lot of really cool people. And where I would say that my favorite role was whenever I was on the National Security Council as a director of intelligence programs, because I got to see the policy aspect and how that dovetailed and affected the actual operational part of what we did. How I got to the CIA is kind of interesting only because I grew up overseas primarily. My dad was in the military, so spent a good chunk of my formative years in Germany and Austria. So my kids laugh at me because I've been to countries that don't exist anymore, which tells you how old I am. And then also spent a lot of time all over the United States. So by the time I graduated high school, I had been to 10 different places, more than 10 different places living. And when I was in college, I obviously everybody graduates with a Bachelor of Science degree. And the few courses that I could actually choose, I decided to choose German and Spanish so that I could actually go out and have a beer at the end of the night, as opposed to be in my room doing problem sets for engineering coursework. Unfortunately, when I was at the NSC, my son was diagnosed with leukemia, and the regular chemo therapy protocol didn't work, so he had to go through a bone marrow transplant at the onset of the pandemic in 2020. And he's great. He is fully cured. He's a walking, talking, skating miracle, and is a freshman in college. But I recognized that I had gotten a second chance with my kids, and as a mother, I didn't want to forsake any of that. And so I looked at what could I still do to bring back the mission, but do it on my own terms and not have to be in a secret room all day long and have, not have access to technology when I needed it if my kids needed me right away. So I had gone back to get 2 MBAs through Georgetown and Asada Business School, and was able to travel the world during that MBA program and got to see just how much technology was really looking at and changing the world and how we did things right in everyday life. And so I am the Senior Vice President and Deputy General Manager of the intelligence portfolio within Blue Halo. Blue Halo is a 2,400 employee strong technology disruptor that provides innovative technology solutions and capabilities for the national security and defense structure for the United States and its allies. Happenstance, I just got a call from a recruiter, and they were talking about Blue Halo needing somebody who had been in the intelligence community and understood. And it was a great fit. It's been a great fit. I've been there for a little bit over 2 years. The people are wonderful. I feel like I have found an organization that is just as committed to mission, even though it's in the industry side. And the cool thing is I'm working with people that are really diverse in their background and are amazingly talented, and look at problems and look at how technology can help solve some of those problems. So for me, it's great because I can take that innovation and those technology solutions and go back and help the community and the Department of Defense and the national security apparatus look at things a little bit differently to solve some really critical problems. If you missed part one, go check that out first. Katrina talks about her love of Taylor Swift, her origin story from a low-income neighborhood to the University of Chicago to law school, and her early career on Barack Obama's campaign.
So I get this call, right? And they've decided, like, I was doing in the advance world on the campaign, and I get this call studying for the bar. In the way the bar works, like, you do all this study, you go to all these classes, and then there's this like final 2 weeks of the bar exam, like before the bar exam, where all the classes stop, and everybody tells you this is the 2 weeks where it all comes together, and like you'll be fine. You're not gonna feel like you know any of it, but in the last 2 weeks you'll figure it all out, and it'll be fine. And so I get this call, and it's Emmett Beliveau, who's like the head of Advance, and he's like, we're going on an international trip, and we're going to Jordan, like literally the country that I am obsessed with and have lived in and all this stuff. He's like, we have nobody who's ever even been to Jordan on the campaign, and like this is going to be the big stop where he like comes, you know, over, and you know, then there was the Jordan stop. He was in Afghanistan. That was the secret part. Then he came to Jordan. Then he went to Germany and did the like big speech with the 200,000 people.
I remember that.
This was the international
international
trip.
Gosh, I remember that.
And he calls me and he's like, and we want you to like go and do this advanced trip. And oh, by the way, when is it? It is the 2 weeks when
you're supposed
to, yeah. And so I remember I was like, it's hard for people who don't know me super well to understand why this was so hard for me, but like the Jordan thing and the ability to go on the international trip with him was so important to me. And I was like, and so I remember thinking, okay, I was like, but if I go on this trip and I don't pass the bar, like how shitty is that going to feel? And I kept turning it over in my mind. And then I clicked on something that really has helped me ever since, which is you really have to think about what your worst case scenario really is to get the right answer. And in this case, my worst case scenario actually wasn't that I went on the trip and failed the bar.
Oh,
it was that I didn't go on the trip and I failed the bar anyway.
Yeah.
That was actually the worst case scenario. And the reality that was a possibility made me decide to go on the trip. Because I was like, well, if I go on the trip and fail the bar, at least the worst possible thing didn't happen. At least I prevented that. You know what I mean? That's how I thought about it.
That's such a smart way of thinking about it.
And so I go on the trip, and like it's amazing and still one of the best experiences I had on the whole campaign. And then I came back, and I mean, I studied, you know, whatever it was, like 11 hours each way and like whatever. But I mean, that you can't really study while you're in Jordan advancing this international trip.
No.
And then I sat for the bar, and you guys are not going to believe this, and there was an earthquake in the middle of the bar exam. I mean, you can go back.
Was it the DC one?
No, this was California.
Oh.
And so I had to fly to California to go take the bar, and the California bar, there was an earthquake. It affected the whole Southern California area. There are literally lawsuits that were filed about people who failed the bar that year because different testing centers handled the earthquake differently.
And for our listeners, the California bar is no joke.
No, it's really hard.
They're all different, and the California bar is like one of the
California
hardest.
bars, yeah, like 50% pass rate or something like that. Anyway, miraculously, I passed the bar. And keep in mind, that was not a guarantee because I was not actually good at being a lawyer, and I knew that already. So I was like, worst case, I'll take it again. But I passed the bar, and everything was fine, and I also went on the trip. So none of the worst case things happened, but it was awesome.
Oh my gosh.
And so anyway, so then I'm out of law school. I have passed the bar. Obama has won the presidency. Fun side story is that I was in charge of 2,800 members of the domestic and international press on election night in Grant Park. And it was the coolest and most amazing thing.
I was there. It was amazing.
It was amazing. It was such unseasonably warm day in November. It was beautiful, like the skyline. It was
my two best friends and one of my best friends' husbands. And I remember taking the train. We got off. We all bought like Obama T-shirts, like from a side vendor.
Yeah.
And we still have pictures. We still talk about it. Like it was
so great,
so amazing.
It was a very happy. It felt like you felt it. So after all that's done, we all go to DC. You know, I worked on the transition and whatever. And then I had this like profound realization that was really painful for me that like there was actually no way that I was going to get a government job, like a political appointee government job, that would pay me enough money to be able to make the minimum payments on my student loans. And it was this unbelievable reality. I had taken out, you know, between undergrad and law school, because I didn't come from money, as we've established, altogether $200,000. I had $40,000 from University of Chicago, which is actually quite low. It costs way more than that to go there. That was about the equivalent of 1 year of University of Chicago. But for law school, there's not really like the same kind of scholarships or grants, so you really just pay for it all. So $200,000. Up until my 40th birthday during COVID, I paid $2,500 a month in student loans.
Holy moly!
Since my 20s, and it had a really profound impact on the choices I was able to make. And I wish I didn't. You know, I was like right in the generation where we really didn't talk about what it all meant. Really. And I also didn't have financial literacy in my household when I grew up. So I just was like, well, they're giving me this money and school is good. So like, it's fine. And I never really had an understanding of what it was going to mean to the choices that I could make.
Wow.
That I was paying $2,500 a month in student loans.
That's like hitting a brick wall all of a sudden.
Totally.
It was completely, and I remember not having, there wasn't even an option, right? Like I was a brand new lawyer who with barely any job experience. The only jobs that were available to me in the administration were going to be the special assistant to like some bloody blub. And that job at best was going to pay me like 40 grand, 50 grand, maybe at that time.
Yeah.
There was no way that the maths was going to math. And so I had to make the decision to go back to the law firm that had hired me when I was in the sort of on-campus recruiting stuff, because it was the only job I could have that I was qualified to have that would pay my student loans.
Wow.
Wow, this is like, so I haven't been on this journey in a really long time. It turns out okay, though. So I go to the law firm. I'm at DLA Piper in D.C. I work on the most interesting case that anyone has ever worked on in a corporate law firm. Again, because I speak Spanish. So this is, you guys are not going to believe this. Once again,
we should just start a tally of the number of times that she says
No,
that.
take a shot, everybody, for each time. Each time.
So we represented the government of Peru in their case against Yale University over the repatriation of the Machu Picchu artifacts. And I literally was the associate, like me and my friend Christina, still friends, by the way, we're the little mini associates, like going to the archives in like the National Geographic and also in Peru to like read 100-year-old letters from Hiram Bingham about about taking these, you know, it's like the classic Indiana Jones. My husband always makes fun of me. He's like, it belongs in a museum. Because it was, you know, all of these like old ancient doctrines of laches and whatever of like, and what was really important to me that I figured out, I was only at DLA Piper for a year. And what I figured out in the time that I worked on this case was that this was it. I peaked in year one and it was never going to be better than this. And if I don't like this, it's all downhill from here. And I didn't. I was like, you know, like, and most people who are lawyers and early in their career would be like, this is the most amazing case. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, document reviews and like writing mean letters to people, like, it just doesn't seem like what I want to do, you know? So I then, because of a woman, an amazing national security woman named Wendy Marigi, she was working at ODNI. She had come from the campaign. She knew me from the campaign, and she had the ability to hire a chief of staff, and she hired me. And I went over to ODNI, but the thing that happened in between those two things is that I was able to go to ODNI as a GS-15 because I had been at the law firm, because I had made that choice, because I was coming in laterally as like a,
oh my gosh,
and so because I was able to come in as a GS-15, even though I took probably a $50,000 pay cut or whatever to go into government, I could pay the student loans. Like it was enough to pay the student loans, and it made everything else happen that happened. And at this point, like, I'll breeze through a couple of things because, you know, the time at ODNI was amazing, and it made me, I realized, like, that government actually was everything that I wanted it to be and hoped. Like, there were no parts of it that that I didn't really find meaningful and that didn't inspire me. And also the people were way better than I thought. Like I had a caricature of a government bureaucrat. And then in real life, I found that like those people exist some pockets, but like most of the people are actually really, really impressive and motivated by the same things as you. And so I worked on GTMO, rendition, detention, and interrogation. I went to the National Counterterrorism Center and worked on Benghazi and Boston as the assistant to the director at the time, Matt Olson. So I had a front row seat for both of those really major moments. And because I was one of the few people who spoke both press and intel, because I had sort of managed the traveling press corps for Biden or Obama and Biden, actually, when it was the Obama-Biden press corps. But also because I had done some comms early in my time working with Wendy Marigi, when the Snowden thing happened, they were like, who speaks press and intel? We need somebody at the intersection. And it turns out there's like 5 people that do
I was
that.
going to say.
And so I got hired or got the detail to go over to NSC to, be part of the team that led the response to the Snowden disclosures. And it was the most incredible thing. And guys, wait for it. You're not going to believe this. I was pregnant. So the first person other than my husband that I told that I was pregnant was Christy Abizaid, probably a name familiar to some of the listeners here, who was at the time the person sourcing candidates for this role. Because when she called me to talk to me about it, I was like, I feel like I have to disclose to you that I am pregnant. And I'm like only a few weeks pregnant and I don't really, I don't know if it's going to work out or whatever. And I'm not telling people, but I, don't want you to put your faith in me and then like find this out later. And I didn't tell you. And she was like, Katrina, I remember this. She was like, if we are still dealing with this problem 9 months from now, we will have failed. And I was like, okay. She's like, I don't care that you're pregnant. Get over here. Aww. And so I took that job. And I remember this was like in the era of like Lean In had just come out and I had just read the book, And I remember very much being like, okay, I'm going to have to consciously make a decision to lean in because this feels really like a lot to me. And I did. I was like, well, if I don't take this job right now, I am going to have a baby and it's going to be so hard. And like, I'm probably maybe never going to have this opportunity again. Or if I do, I'm going to be trading off something that seems even harder. So I just decided like, yeah, I'm going to go there pregnant. So I toddled around the West Wing, like pregnant for 9 months. And we, the big speech that Obama gave on the, intelligence reform was in January and my daughter was born in April.
Oh, wow.
You know what's so cool is that the consulting company that you were interviewing or the guy that you were interviewing with where your headline was you were pregnant, you just didn't, he had to read the article to see all the other stuff.
I've never made that connection. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you were having a family. Yeah, exactly. You just had also done
I just also
a million other things.
was pregnant in
these are the cases where I wish you could just send your life's, we should just send him this. I wish we knew who the guy was. And we send him
I don't remember.
this podcast and be like, boom.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
So can we, for just 1 second, talk about the experience on Benghazi? Just because when you said that, it's like, that must have been pretty surreal. What was that like?
It was really surreal. It was really intense. It was some of the best intelligence work I've ever seen at the senior most levels. Like the intelligence work was so incredible and important. And it was also when I realized that people on the Hill lie. And it was really sad. I remember
that's like heartbreaking.
It was really sad for me. I mean, I had a couple of moments of like those educations where you realize something like when you realize your parents aren't invincible and you're like, oh my God. And it was seeing, I just had this faith that like, oh, we're going to go in a classified setting. We're going to show them the actual CCTV footage of what actually happened on the compound. And then like, they will have the facts. And then that's the solution. And we did all that and the briefing and it was so good and it was so clear and the analytic conclusions were so well-founded. And then I watched members of Congress walk out and walk to a podium and lie. And it was like, wow. Like based on like political considerations. Yeah. And I didn't know that happened before. I just thought people didn't know or they
they heard
had-
something
yeah, like-
different, the way they
yeah,
interpreted
of
it or
course,
something.
yeah.
or maybe there was a delta between, different versions of the truth.
Yeah,
But like,
man.
no. And that was very,
The truth was
sad.
was not the answer. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't enough. That's so sad.
yeah.
Okay. Wow. I don't ever want this to end. Okay. So, where did we leave off?
We're pregnant at the White House.
Pregnant. What? Okay. So what's next?
So then I have a baby.
You have a
and
baby.
thank God I had been at the White House accruing all of that comp time, because this was in the time before you had paid leave for federal workers. So I had 5 months of maternity leave.
Wow.
And I was really fortunate to be able to use that and to have it in the first place. And so I took some time off, and then I went back to ODNI and did a job that I call boring but important, where I did like a solid kind of mission management group chief type of job. And I led the development of this, what was then called the Integrated Mission Strategy, but it was basically the first effort of ODNI to provide unified, informed guidance to inform the IPPBE process, like basically the budget process for the intelligence community. And it was what I loved about that job, many things I loved about that job, but one of them was that I had to get very senior. There's these things called National Intelligence Managers, or NIMs, and they are the senior most intelligence official in their different regions and functions. So there's like a NIM for China and a NIM for cyber and a NIM for, basically all the different geographic regions and all the transnational issues. And they had to make group decisions. And they hadn't really done that before. They were really good at being the chief of their thing. But when you had to do something like decide what orbit to put a satellite in that we paid $1 billion for and took 10 years to build, and once you get it up there, you can't move it, like whose AOR is more important kind of thing. You had to make group decisions. And I got to be a part of teaching them how to do that. And it was really awesome and really, really valuable. And then the Trump election, the first Trump term happened. And I was a career civil servant, so it didn't impact me. But it felt like a change, like it felt like a time where a bunch of things, a bunch of people were literally transitioning. And I thought I probably should transition too. Like, I'd been doing the mission management job for a few years, and I was ready for something different. And I had this inkling, like, I have this law degree. It's been this credential that I've had, but nobody in government really thinks of you as a lawyer until you've been a lawyer in government. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to go to DOJ, which was a place where I thought I will be insulated from the politics. Ha ha. How naive I was.
It's like even more ha-ha.
I know, it is. So I was like, I'll be insulated from politics, and I could just go be a lawyer. And I was like, I'm scared of it. I'm going to throw myself in the deep end because the DOJ pool is deep. Like, these are really smart people. But if I do this for a year or two on detail, I will have checked this box forever. And nobody will ever have to ask me, like, well, why didn't you do anything with your law degree or whatever? And so I go to DOJ and on this joint duty, and I had incredible experiences that were really amazing. And I thought to myself, like, I'm going to stay at DOJ. I was shocked. I thought I'm in Main Justice, reading documents, and like
all this time
about
you were
the
telling
laws
yourself you're
of
not
these
a
United
lawyer.
States. Yeah, and I was like, I can do this. And what was crazy is all these skills and abilities that I had developed over the years in my ODNI life, I didn't realize how well they were going to translate in this other environment. So things like my ability to display information graphically, which is some, PowerPoints and stuff. We were all into that in the IC. Nobody at DOJ knows how to make a PowerPoint. And the idea of displaying something as a chart instead of in prose, they were like, who made this? This is amazing.
Is this Picasso?
Yeah, no, I know.
And I was like, this isn't even, you guys.
This wonderment.
I know.
Of
I was
a
like,
pie chart.
hey guys, I got more where this came from, And so all of a sudden I'm like this wonderkind at DOJ who knows how to make a chart in a Word document.
That's amazing.
And so, but I also knew how to build coalitions, and DOJ lawyers don't really have to do that, And so the ability to kind of go around and get different stakeholders to agree on things. So I started to realize like I may actually have a future here. And oh, by the way, since we hire like every Supreme Court clerk that, you know, finishes their Supreme Court clerkship, like there are all these brilliant young people that when I had an actual legal question, I could be like, go research this for me and bring me a memo, you know? And so it turns out like I could teach them the ways of the policy community and they, you know, they felt like the things that I was doing were so unique. So it was a really interesting marriage of things. And then I inherited the immigration and watch listing portfolio. And I became one of the lead lawyers in the policy discussion around child separation. And I had a 3-year-old at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you know what? I'm out. And I was like, you know, but interestingly, I made some choices that I think were the right ones. I wasn't sure I would know. Like, am I going to end up being the frog in the boiling water or whatever, where you don't realize that like you've crossed some boundary that's important to you? And it turns out, no, there were many things that I disagreed with the Trump team on, as there had been many things that I disagreed with the Obama team before them on. And I didn't, you know, as a career civil servant, you don't think like I get to be the arbiter of these things.
Yeah,
like I don't expect to agree with the government's decision 100% of the time. And I actually think that's a strength of our system. But I did know when the boundary had been crossed, and it was, people forget, but there was a period of time where we actually, the government said that we didn't have a policy to separate parents and kids at the border. And that was not true. That was a lie. And I felt very conflicted about it. I remember talking to some of my mentors about it and how to handle it. And is this really different, or is this politics getting in the way of, you know, my judgment, that kind of thing. And then but I didn't decide to like self-immolate and, you know, write, you know, go very public about it. I went to a think tank, to the Center for American Progress, and I had realized that the content of the policies really mattered to me more than I thought they did. And so I decided, like, I'll go work on the policies in the place where it's appropriate to do so. I got hired by Kelly Magsamen to do that job, and who's an amazing leader. And I got tremendous experience, and I got to work with really smart people, and I got to really lean into being a progressive, which I had never really done, you know, despite having been in Obama land as long as I was. And it was great. And it was absolutely the foundation that led to me being able to go into the Biden-Harris administration for the last 3 years as a political appointee, for the first 3 years of the term. And I got to, you know, be the PDASD, or Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, SOLIC, one of the longest titles in government. One fun fact about government titles is the longer your title is, the less important you are. So it's not, it's like if you are really important, you are SecDef. You know what I mean? I had a very long title. But then I became Chief of Staff to the Secretary of the Army, and which was also incredible. I got to work for Christine Wormuth, who I admired from afar and admired so much more once I was up close. You know, if you follow me on LinkedIn, then you probably know that we went to the Taylor Swift concert together in New Orleans.
Did you guys make friendship bracelets together?
We absolutely did, and they said Army things on them.
Oh.
So instead of like 1989,
Amanda's loving this.
They said 1775, which is when the Army was founded. Yeah. Or Getaway Tank, or In My General Era. Like they were so great.
My gosh.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I have so many ideas about swag. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. It was so fun. And we are like genuinely friends. And that friendship was,
that's really special.
One of the best things that came out of my time as a political appointee. And so then there we are. I'm, you know, in year 4 of the term, or I'm about to enter year 4 of the term, and somewhere along as the story progresses, we skipped a really important part, which is that my husband got diagnosed with a rare form of cancer in year 2 of COVID. He's fine now, and he is totally recovered. And the good news is he had a kind of cancer that was really, really responsive to chemo. Called germ cell cancer. But the bad news is the type of chemo that you have to get to overcome germ cell is basically like taking you to the brink of death and not letting you die and bringing you back. So
Oh my
we
goodness.
were in like a total COVID bubble. Like he was neutropenic. Like for months, you know, we couldn't interact with the outside world. It was so intense. And this was like when people were starting to emerge from the COVID,
Yeah.
you know, times. And it was awful and super hard. And some of the women in NatSec who had spouses with cancer were the most amazing to lean on in that time. People who I did not know at all, but picked up the phone and like were like, "Girl, we've been there. Here's the stuff you need to know." It was so amazing, and probably like it kept me afloat during some pretty like challenging moments. But one of the things that came out of that, you know, my husband was diagnosed on a Tuesday, and that Friday was my first interview for the PTSD Solik job.
Wow.
And we talked about it, and I just was like, I don't even know how to like process any of this. And we just sort of decided to keep going until it didn't make sense. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this interview. You know, I did the job interview without.
It's like the pregnancy.
Yeah, I just was like, I'm going to go until I can't go. And where we ended up is we delayed my start at Solik in the Defense Department long enough for him to finish chemo. And so I started 3 weeks after he finished chemo. And the only thing he asked of me was don't be unemployed at the end. He's like, we've been through a lot. I just don't want to go through that. And I was like, okay, done. So I told Christine Wormuth when she hired me, I was like, I'm going to leave in the last year. I just, want you to know. And so when the last year came, when I was approaching it, I figured out, I talked to all the people. Everybody told me it takes like 9 months to run like a proper job search, especially if you're trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. Like this wasn't a transition to like something very obvious.
Yeah.
And so I did what, Katrina Mulligan has always done. I broke it into smaller parts. I was like, well, there's 3 things that I need to accomplish. Phase 1 is figure out what I want to do with my life. Phase 2 is apply for those jobs. And phase 3 is get the job. So I was like, each of those phases gets 3 months. And I just broke it down. And so I started having coffees. I do the coffee thing. I'm like, here's what I learned from doing the coffees. Because a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are in this job phase. So I'm going to tell you some things I learned. Number 1, the coffee thing, super important to do. You can't avoid doing it. You have to do it. It sucks. Nobody likes it on either side. But you have to do volume. Volume is what matters.
Yeah.
1 in 8 to 9 of those coffees will tell you some nugget of thing that's useful. The rest of them will all feel useless. And the problem is you don't know which one is the useful one. So you have to just do them at volume. And then you will collect these nuggets. And over time, you will piece together something really important about yourself. What I learned, I did 40 of them.
Oh my God.
I was also always told doing those coffees when you're looking for a job, making those coffees like your full-time job.
Yeah, that's totally true. It ends up, for me, I couldn't make it my full-time job because I was working in the Army, but I did it very intentionally and I scheduled them and I just did it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I pieced together through the constellation of nuggets that I accumulated was that I really wanted to work in an American company that had a global impact. And that doesn't sound all that profound, but it was really important in narrowing and scoping what I wanted. I didn't want to work for a French company or for, like a Rheinmetall or, because it mattered to me that the company was American. And I wanted that company to have some sort of global impact. And where it first took me was actually hotels. Like the two big hotel brands are headquartered here. And so I started talking to people at Marriott and Hilton and being like, you have a global presence, you care about keeping people safe, which is something that I also care about. And so I started going in this direction that was, it was interesting to me. And I thought I would be proud to work for these brands. These are brands that I care about and say something about, me or whatever. And then I talked to Alice Hunt Friend, who is another woman in NatSec. She had gone to Google to work on AI, and she was so enthusiastic about the work that she was doing. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do what you're doing because you sound so happy and so energized about all of it. And she was like, there's this NatSec job that's coming available at OpenAI. I know they're sourcing candidates for it. Let me, do you want me to put your name in? I was like, sure. And so she sends my resume to some people, and a week later, far before I was ready for it, they reached out and they were like, we'll have this coffee. I thought I was having like one of these chats, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the
Yeah.
40 chats. And I get on the call and it's like a full-on interview that I have done zero to prepare for. And I'm like, oh my God. And I say to the guy who's interviewing me, I was like, I am embarrassed, but like, I need to be honest with you. Like, I'm not going to bullshit you. And like, I didn't know this was an interview. I thought we were having a chat about like what might be possible. And I haven't prepared and I don't actually know anything about the job that you're hiring for. And he was like, oh, yeah, no, you couldn't have known anything about it actually, because like we didn't even post it on the internet and we're only sourcing candidates privately. And so like, yeah, let me tell you about it because you couldn't possibly know about it. I was like, oh, whew, dodged a bullet. And then, I start going through the process, which at OpenAI is very long, and realize that like, this is kind of like, I have hit the jackpot. Like this job is such a big deal. And like, I start taking it really seriously. And then I start talking to people about it, like the figuring out like, who are the people who can give me good advice on this. And every single person is like, oh my God, if you get this job, this is like a big deal. Like you need to call every favor you possibly have. So I am like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I start calling Christine Wormuth and Matt Olson and like all the big cheese people that I've ever met from all these different places. And they're all sending emails to OpenAI and somehow I got the job. And I realized, this past year when I went to the Aspen Security Forum with our head of global affairs at the time, Anna Makanju, and we walked around like, basically all of DC relocates to Aspen for this thing. And over and over again, she's like, oh yeah, that person wanted your job. Oh yeah, I saw them when I interviewed them for your job. And I was like, oh my God, like, how did I get this job? And also, stay away from me, everybody. I was like making knife hands. I'm like, dude, I got this job. You can't come for me.
That's hilarious.
So funny. And it really has been, like for me, like career arc wise, really an amazing experience. I definitely feel like some of the most consequential national security decisions that are going to be made in the next 5 years are going to be made at companies like mine. And I feel very, very lucky to be able to help them navigate that with integrity, because getting this right is going to be hard. And one of the things that I'm excited, like I'll share one of my joys with you guys. Today, OpenAI announced a partnership, first of its kind, with the U.S. National Labs to deploy our model weights for the first time inside secure government infrastructure on a classified system. And we are literally going to change the future of science and do a tremendous amount of good for national security in the process. And it has been this labor of love for so many months that culminated in today making this announcement. Our CEO and the director of the National Labs did it this morning. And like being able to be a steward of those kinds of relationships at scale, it's big. It's as big as what I felt like I was doing in government. And so it's fun.
think that's so important. I mean, we're going to talk, there's just so much, but I love that is kind of the period at the, at the end of this, where you are right now so far, right? Because it shows, there's so many people that we all know that, leave their time in government and they don't know if they can find something else that is going to give them purpose, give them life, give them those things, right?
I totally know that feeling.
And many of the women who leave military service or a career in government or in intel struggle with that.
Yeah.
They struggle with finding something else that's going to, their purpose was always the safety of the U.S. or, our society. But then they leave and they're like, I need something that's going to give me equal purpose and I'm going to be equally excited about. And so the fact that you have come.
Totally.
I don't know if we could properly ever thank you. And I think the audience is just going to eat every moment of this up because you have been you've been so authentic and you've given like your whole self to and I don't even know if you think you have, but to us, I just feel like This was so special. And we
Oh,
just
thank
really
you.
appreciate you sharing your life with us because it has been an incredible life. I mean,
Thank you. Look, one of the things that I will say too is that there's a healthy amount of luck that everybody has in their career journey. And, you know, I think it's also important to honor the role that luck plays in all of this. Like, these things didn't happen to me because, like, I uniquely deserve them. Like, some of this is the magical constellation of luck. And, like, in my case, a lot of women, frankly, who have come along at the exactly right time and either stopped me from falling, like when I was in the throes of cancer times, or given me the one nudge that made the difference. I mean, I don't think that Alice Huntfriend got me the job at OpenAI, but I also firmly believe I would not have gotten it without her.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things can both be true.
Yeah.
Right? And like, one of the things that I try to do is, you know, create time to do that for other people. We all owe a debt to everyone else that, you know, or to the universe that like we have to repay in terms of, you know, helping people the way that we were helped.
absolutely.
And also, you know, ensuring that opportunities don't just accrue to the people who are exactly like us, you know? And so I have benefited tremendously from those things. And I, you know, intend or strive to be somebody who pays that forward.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can all say that you have.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I hate to end this for
I
our
know.
audience, but we do have one more question.
We sure do.
And
Is it spicy?
I mean, depends.
I think it is actually our spiciest question.
Everyone says this is the hardest question that we ask. So, in keeping with our name, Iron Butterfly, which was given to Eloise Page, the first female chief of station at CIA, if you were to give yourself a code name, what would it be and why?
It would almost certainly be a Taylor Swift reference.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're on the right track.
What would I give myself and why? I can't immediately, like if I had ChatGPT to help me right now, I would ask it for, well, actually it wouldn't answer this question because Taylor Swift references are copyrighted, but I would like try to figure out like what Taylor Swift song would achieve this. But like, it would be something about, like, earlier I said to you guys that you had Shawshanked your way to making Iron Butterfly what it is. And you guys both had this kind of, you guys both liked that phrase.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that I always go back to Shawshanking my way to something is I don't think anything really important that I've ever done has been like one big step that I took or one big moment. It's the accumulative effect of digging one little thing at a time that builds up to something that's really like powerful and important. And like I have this image in my mind of me just like kind of like with a little pause, like trying to, you know, get a little bit closer to the thing that I'm pursuing. And for some, you know, I think that sometimes when you're looking at someone else's career, it can feel like these big moments that went from where one thing happened and then you went to another thing or you achieved this big thing. But underneath all of those experiences, like everything we just talked about was little me, my little pause, Shawshank in my way, like one little step at a
Oh my
time.
God. Should it be Who's Afraid of Little Old Me?
I was hoping you guys came up with that.
Oh, she went there. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah,
Incredible.
We can't top that.
Amazing. Amazing.
Well, there you go. You've made two women in here very, very happy. You're very happy today. Katrina, man, I just can't thank you enough. Thank you for coming. Thank you for saying yes. And on behalf of all of us, the Iron Butterfly ecosystem, thank you for your service to this country.
And thank you for being you.
Oh,
This was so fun.
you're welcome. This was fun.
This has been an episode of Iron Butterfly Podcast. To learn more about Iron Butterfly Media, visit our website at www.ironbutterflymedia.com. If you like the show, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and follow Iron Butterfly on social media for bonus content. You can also support us on Patreon.
Lastly, we want to thank our producer, Amanda Young, and the entire Iron Butterfly team. Stay fierce, and we'll talk next time.